Hi. My name is Charles Umeh. How you doing? So I promised I was going to talk about generations in the workplace. Okay, so let's start this way. So we know very well that there are five generations, five the workplace. Um, the most popular one we have the Gen Zs or those born in the century. We call them the Generation Zs or the centenarians. They were born at the end of the century. We have the Gen Y or the millennials. We have the Gen X, we have the boomers or the silent generation. So for this conversation, we'll start with the most popular ones. No, I'll start with the baby boomers. They're the oldest in the workplace. The idea is, why were they called boomers? Now, interestingly, they were born in an era where clearly, if you look at the history around 1945 to 1961, that was post World War II. What was happening at that time? We looked at a war that was trying to pick up from a world war. Now, we always say that every generation, they are moved by the things that happen in their era. So what happened within this era? This was the era where we had, interestingly, people were coming out. It's a post-World War era. Most people were trying to thrive. Yes, they were boomers because they were high birth rates. However, there were things that were happening in that era. It was the era where we had, in arts and culture, we had the Beatles, we had the John Lennons, we also had the man going to the moon. We had, in football and sports, it was the era of Pele and Maradona. So look at, this is the era. These are the things happening in different aspects of their own personal lives. But look back at the boomers in the workplace, or most of them that are still in the workplace. What do we have from them? Interesting thing that the most reliable generation, that the ones that tell you in the workplace, I've spent 20 years doing this. I've been doing this for the past 20 years. They've worked in a place for 20 years. It's the rarest achievement you can ever see in a 2025, 2024 workplace. Because we have a generation that spends, if you see anyone that does a year to 6 months, because you're looking at people's CV, you're saying 6 months, 1 year. So when you see someone that says, I've done this for 20 years, then what? They don't need anything to tell you about loyalty because they own loyalty. They are the ones that, in Africa, in Nigeria, where I come from, if the workplace tells you something like, first name basis, don't fall into that trap. Always find out, um, try to respect them. Most of them are like your parents, and respect is something you don't joke with them. But however, where would you need them? For most of them that are retired, the first advice is always that you also need them in the workplace. You need them for the youngest generation or the younger generation to job shadow, because they come it is like having someone that is like an encyclopedia and you decide to throw them away because of all grow old. It will all happen in the cycle. I'm always of the opinion that you have them when you're having trainings in your workplace. You should be able to have fireside chats with them. Why? Because they bring an experience, and they serve as physical models, even though you might not think is important. They serve as models. They are good on your boards. They are good in your training and recruitment because they have seen patterns. So if you have a boomer around you, the best thing to always do is to experience and soak in everything they bring to the table. The funny thing about them is the boomers are still the only reason why we still do newspapers, because I know that of all the five generations, you can't see a Gen X, a Gen Z, a Gen Y read a newspaper. They buy it, but it's rare. The main reason why we still do adverts and papers is for people like them. So clearly, these are a generation that you don't joke with. Like I said, we would all get to that level. Loyalty is key to them. In the workplace, they are the ones that have the experience and they've seen patterns. If you ever have a boomer that is in finance that has a good name, you should always, even though the world has changed, you should always play around, embracing everything they've done because they see well in the future. Okay, those are the boomers. The next one is Gen X. Then we come to the next generation. Yeah.